The intersection outside Maple Street Credit Union had exactly 90 seconds of foot traffic every weekday at 8:15. And Walter Reyes had learned, over 6 years of standing in that crosswalk with an orange vest and a stop sign, that 90 seconds was enough time to notice almost anything. He noticed Naomi Chen first because she walked fast in expensive shoes on a street where nobody walked fast. She was 33, sharp-postured, the kind of person who checked her phone at red lights out of habit rather than need. She was the credit union's new compliance officer 6 weeks into the job, and she had absolutely no idea that the old man in the orange vest holding up traffic for her had spent 9 years, reading exactly the kind of numbers she was now being paid to protect. What? Walter noticed that Tuesday morning would cost someone their freedom, and almost cost Naomi her career for believing him. Morning, Walter said, the way he said it to everyone, lowering his stop sign to let a woman with a stroller cross first. You're new. 6 weeks, Naomi said, not really looking at him. Phone still in hand. There's something funny going on in those account transfers you're processing on the Ashford estate. He said it plainly, the way a person says something about the weather, layered like someone doesn't want it traced back to one source. Naomi stopped walking. She looked at him properly for the first time. An older man, maybe close to 70, faded orange vest, the kind of face that had spent decades being looked past rather than at. Excuse me? Just an observation, Walter said, already turning to hold traffic for the next cluster of pedestrians. Have a good day. She almost let it go. She told herself later that she almost let it go. The way people tell themselves things after they've already decided not to. Naomi Chen had been in compliance for 11 years. Most spent proving to rooms full of men twice her age that competence didn't need a deep voice to be taken seriously. She had a nose for patterns, an instinct that had gotten her promoted twice and burned once, badly, at her last firm, when she'd flagged a transaction chain that turned out to belong to a managing partner's brother-in-law. She'd been right. She'd also been quietly pushed out 6 months later, and had promised herself, walking into this job, that she would trust the numbers and nobody's opinion of them, including her own doubts, which was exactly why a crossing guard's offhand comment shouldn't have mattered to her at all. Before we continue, if you believe that expertise has no uniform and truth wears no badge, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today. She pulled the Ashford estate file that afternoon anyway, mostly to prove to herself there was nothing there. The account belonged to an elderly widow, Eleanor Ashford, 91, whose late husband had built a modest fortune in hardware decades earlier and left it entirely in her name. Naomi scanned 6 months of transfers. Nothing obviously wrong. Standard estate management, a financial advisor named Curtis Boyle handling disbursements, routine-looking transactions moving between 3 accounts. She almost closed the file. Then she remembered what Walter had said. Layered like someone doesn't want it traced back to one source. She looked again, this time tracing each transfer backward instead of forward, the way she'd been trained to a decade ago and had almost forgotten under years of dashboards that did the tracing for her. And there it was. Small, deliberate, easy to miss if you were looking at any single transaction instead of the pattern across all of them. 3 accounts moving money in a rotation that always ended in the same 4th account, an account not listed anywhere in Eleanor Ashford's estate paperwork, structured just under the reporting threshold every time. For 11 months, her hands went cold. The next morning, she found Walter at his corner before her shift, orange vest, stop sign resting against his hip while he waited for the school crossing rush. How did you know that? She said, no preamble. About the Ashford transfers. Walter looked at her for a long moment. The particular look of a man deciding whether a door was worth opening again after it had been slammed on him before. I used to do forensic accounting, he said. 22 years. I caught patterns like that for a living, the unsaid sat. Heavier than anything spoken. The reason a man with 2 decades of forensic expertise was standing in a crosswalk holding a stop sign, instead of a case file, Naomi didn't ask why he'd stopped. Something in his face told her the answer wouldn't be simple, and she'd learned, the hard way, that some doors open slower than others. "I was right?" Walter asked instead. "There's a fourth account. Rotating structured transfers, all under threshold, all outside the estate paperwork." She said it fast, the words tumbling out the way they did when someone finally had somewhere to put them. "I need to know how you saw that from a crosswalk." Walter almost smiled. "I don't see it from the crosswalk. I see the advisor's car in that lot every Tuesday and Thursday, same hours as the elderly client's appointments. And I've watched enough of these men over enough years to know what a rotation schedule looks like even from the outside. You get an eye for it. Doesn't turn off just because you're not getting paid for it anymore." He told her the rest standing at that corner, in pieces between waves of children crossing to school. 22 years at a regional firm, most spent finding exactly this kind of fraud, advisors and trustees quietly bleeding elderly clients who trusted them completely, moving money in patterns designed to stay just below the line that triggered automatic review. His last case, 6 years ago, involved a client's son well-connected at the firm's biggest client. Walter had been right about the fraud. He had also been right that reporting it would end his career, and it did, in a slow, deliberate, plausible deniability kind of way he couldn't prove in the exit interview. He took the crossing guard job because it paid enough, kept him outside, and let him watch in his own small way. Over people the way he used to before everything fell apart. "I never stopped noticing," he said. "I just stopped being anyone whose noticing counted." What Naomi did next would decide whether this fraud got buried the way Walter's last one had, or whether, this time, someone with a badge finally listened. She listened. She spent the next 4 days building the case properly, methodically, the way Walter had walked her through it in 15-minute conversations at his corner before and after her shifts. How to trace the rotation cleanly enough that no lawyer could call it coincidence. How to document it in a way that survived scrutiny from people who wanted it to be nothing. Curtis Boyle had been quietly draining Eleanor Ashford's estate for 11 months, funneling just under $200,000 through the rotating accounts into a shell entity he controlled. When Naomi presented the finding to the credit union's board, she brought Walter's name into the room deliberately, refusing to let his role disappear the way it had at his last job. "A crossing guard outside this building noticed the pattern before I did," she told them. "He used to be a forensic accountant. He's the reason we caught this before it went further." The board didn't love hearing it from a compliance officer 6 weeks into the job, citing a crossing guard as her primary source. But the numbers didn't care who noticed them first, and the numbers were airtight. Curtis Boyle was suspended within the week, the case referred to state regulators, and Eleanor Ashford's estate was frozen and protected before another dollar moved. Somewhere in the space between what people are paid to notice and what people actually see, a truth had been sitting for 11 months, waiting for someone to stop and listen to a man in an orange vest. What happened after wasn't a headline ending. Naomi didn't hand Walter a job or a check for a good photograph. She did something smaller that mattered more. She asked the credit union to bring him on as a part-time fraud pattern consultant, 3 days a week, reviewing exactly the kind of transaction flags his old firm used to pay him to catch, quietly, at a rate that finally matched what his expertise was actually worth. Walter kept the crossing guard job, too. He told Naomi he wasn't ready to give up the corner. The kids who waved at him every morning, the 90 seconds of the day that had kept him steady through 6 years of being nobody in particular. Naomi didn't ask him to choose. Eleanor Ashford, once the fraud came to light, insisted on meeting the man who'd caught it. She was 91, sharp-eyed, despite everything. And when Walter stood in her sitting room in his good coat instead of his orange vest, she took his hand and held it for a long moment before saying anything at all. "Nobody looks at people like us anymore," she said. "You looked." 6 months later, Naomi still crossed at Walter's corner every morning, not because she needed to anymore, but because some mornings started better with someone who'd taught her to actually look. Somewhere on a street corner that most people cross without a second glance, a man in an orange vest kept doing the only work he'd ever been good at, noticing what everyone else walked past. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage and grace. And tell us, has someone's overlooked expertise ever saved you from something you didn't see coming?